So hi, everybody. My name is Jay Manley. I'm the VP of Payments here at Source Technologies. And I'm just going to talk to you about a few things and tell you a little story, why you should be interested in what we have. Why you should care about your AP department. So here's the uncomfortable truth. These days, AP fraud is the new bank robbery, right? It's not criminals are putting on masks and walking into a bank branch anymore. That's how they used to do it. That's dangerous. Now they're sitting behind a keyboard. They're using AI voice duplication, deepfake videos, social engineering, and scripted pressure tactics to really trick AP teams into sending real money to fake vendors using urgent executive requests. And when that happens, your CFO isn't going to blame the fraudster. They're going to say, how did our processes allow this? And then ask you, how do we stop this from happening again? So let me start with a question. Imagine your AP team is sitting at the phone and it rings. The caller ID says it's their CFO. They answer. The caller says, hey, I'm about to board a flight, but I need a quick favor. Probably all had situations like this in the past. Would they recognize that voice? And if it's real or if it's a fake voice, most people think they'd know. But today, that assumption can get you into a lot of trouble. Because the reality is, AI can now clone voices, not just vaguely similar voices, almost perfect ones, using just 10 to 30 seconds of audio from like a podcast, a webinar, a YouTube video, or even your company meeting. The fraudsters can create a voice that sounds exactly like executives at your company. So let me tell you a little bit about a real case in 2024. An AP clerk got a call from their CFO asking them to join a video call. On that call were several executives from the company. They discussed a confidential transaction. Everything looked and sounded normal. The employee went ahead and approved the payments. 15 transfers later, guess what? $25 million was gone. Every person on that call, video call no less, was a deep fake. Now, that was a Fortune 500 company, but it's happening more and more frequently in the SMB market because the thing is seeing and hearing a person is no longer proof of their identity, and it's only getting worse. So why does this matter for AP so much? Because AP has three characteristics that criminals love. First, the AP team moves money all the time. That's their job. Second, they communicate with vendors outside the company every single day. And then finally, AP deals with exceptions all day long, and that isn't often well supported by their executives. And fraud lives in those exceptions. So how can we put the brakes on fraud? Well, Source Technologies RPA can help with you right now. First, we allow you to outsource all your payments, which puts another set of protocols in motion to protect your cash. At its core, RPA lets you outsource the heavy lifting of AP payments, especially the repetitive operational work that eats up each day's processing time. You keep control inside of your ERP, but the processing burden is handled for you. Next, we do the vendor enablement for you. We do the outreach, we do the onboarding so that you can actually move vendors off of checks and onto electronic payments. That's where most programs stall because the AP teams don't have the time to chase vendors, and that's where a lot of fraud occurs. Next, we support real-world mix of payments. We all know that you do have checks, and many of you already have ACHs, and we add a virtual card program onto that as well. Most mid-market companies aren't all electronic overnight, though, so we meet you where you're at, and we move forward at your speed. Now, here's what gets into more of the heavy lifting of fraud protection. We validate the vendors themselves. We do the OFAC check. We'll talk about that in a second. We do TIN matching, so your 1099 type employees, and address verification, so you can verify that they're a real company or a real person. So you're improving the quality of your vendor master file and reducing fraud exposure from the bad or manipulated vendor data. So let's talk a little bit about OFAC, because some of you may not know what that is. So OFAC is the Office of Foreign Asset Control, and they have a list And if you pay someone on that list, you can be subject to significant fines and even potential jail time. But you say, I'm not selling arms. I'm not an arms dealer. But what we're finding out is that it can sometimes be as minor as purchasing a small component for something that you're assembling or a garment that comes from the wrong manufacturer that can get you in that hot water. It's literally a person can have a partial ownership in that company, and that puts them on the OFAC list. And we have significant controls, as you'll see in a minute, to prevent this, as well as we create the mandatory report that you got to give to the Office of Foreign Asset Control within 10 days. So we're helping you right there as well. But here's the big difference. What we do is at the time of each and every payment, we check that list. Not just once a month, not just once in a while, not as a process. We do it with each and every payment. And this is critical. This is crucial to reducing fraud. Now, we also realize that, it's one thing to have a payment provider that you can go to and outsource your payments, but we take it one step further. We can vary that payment provider by payment modality, which means that you could have your checks processed by one provider, your ACH for another, and your card spend by another one. And that way we can optimize your costs and rebates for your company. But even more than that, it gives us the ability to fall back on other providers should any situation come up with any of those providers. Finally, as we mentioned, there's a rebate portion to this program. And what you'll find is as we convert the vendor spend to card spend, you can generate rebates. And that's why we're talking about turning AP into a profit center, because you're not just reducing costs, you're creating measurable financial returns on payments that you've already made anyways. And very importantly, we're built inside of Dynamics BC and Acumatica. That means there's no portal fatigue, right? You're not going to another external process. You don't have to worry about a disconnected process from your ERP. Your ERP remains the system of record. And speaking of that ERP as a system of record, the big fear that most financial teams have is if we modernize payments, are we creating a second system that we have to reconcile and audit forever? And in our case, the answer is no. The ERP stays the system of record. Payments start where your team already works. You're in BC, keep your payments there. The approvals, the dimensions, posting rules, security rules, all of that logic that you have in your system is there and ready for you to execute with and pay when you do your payment run. We're not asking your team to switch their daily work into a new portal. We're saying do the work where they're already at inside of the ERP. The other thing is that we automatically return that reconciliation information into the ERP. We all know that the finance team doesn't want to go around chasing statuses or manual reconciliations. They want that information in there right away. We want the ERP to reflect those records accurately, what was paid, when, and how. Finally, we give you full control over your vendor payment routing, meaning maybe you have some payments that you want to do locally in your ERP and just send them out by check. That's fine. Maybe you always want to have a majority of them through our RPA process. That's fine as well. But you can change that vendor by vendor, and you can do that as you need to during the week, or during the payment run. It's not an all or nothing approach. It's a controlled phased modernization for your company. Again, we come to meet you, not forcing you to meet our requirements. So the headline is really simple here. The ERP remains the source of truth. Payment execution becomes easier and safer. We help protect you from fraud, and the reconciliation comes back automatically without taking control away from you whatsoever. And again, we don't want customers to have to work with external portals. Rather, we want it to be a natural part of their day-to-day processes. That's why we built RPA inside of BC, and it leaves the process as it is, simple. Here you can see, you select what you want to pay. Those payments are sent to be paid by RPA in this case. Those will be sent and we'll pay them, and then the reconciliation flows automatically back into the ERP system. And here's the irony. Everyone wants to move to electronic payments, but oftentimes they can't. And the reason for that is that there's a lot of barriers to entry. First, you need to contact a huge number of vendors. It's not just a project, it's literally a full-time job for someone to contact all your vendors typically. Second, even when you try it, they don't have the right contact information. The AP team reaches a receptionist, a sales rep, a random inbox, something, and it stalls. The enablement effort dies in the weeds. Third, to do ACH, you have to collect and store banking information from your vendors. That creates a real risk: fraud attempts, policy headaches, audit risks, internal fears of what if our master file gets compromised. And the vendors know that too. And so many vendors will simply refuse. They've seen scams, they know what to look for, and so they resist, delay, or refuse. The barrier isn't the technology, it's the enablement and trust. And that's why a lot of companies stay stuck on checks. The winners are the solutions that remove those barriers by handling vendor enablement and reducing the risk to store that banking information and keeping controls tight, especially when the money moves. And that's where we win. We handle all of those for you, easing your team's workload and still moving your vendors to new payment modalities. But you might say, well, my bank has a program like this. Possibly. And they'll often quote you a higher percentage, sometimes called a basis points. And it sounds great from what we offer. But the fact is they cherry pick your vendors. They decide which vendors out of your portfolio that they'll even accept into the program. So yeah, your percentage might be higher, but it applies to a much smaller slice of your total vendor spend. Our approach is different. We understand that it's built on an attempt to enable all the vendors that you have, and we're chasing all of them, not just a handful of cherries. Our goal is to convert as many of them as eligible into rebate positive payments, which usually means you end up with more total rebate dollars, even if the headline percentage isn't the same. And with the bank program, you still have to do the vendor enablement. All that work you thought you were saving, no, it's still on your back. With us, we do that vendor enablement, as we already discussed. So, you want them to cherry pick your vendors? Or you want more total dollars in rebates? We'll let you make that decision, but we think you know the right decision there. Finally, what makes us unique? Well, I've been in this industry a long time, and I've talked to many customers, and I think what we have to offer is something clearly different. First, we do that OFAC check at the time of each payment. That significantly reduces fraud, and that's something that's really needed these days. Second, we support multiple payment providers. Again, that's fairly unique. I don't know too many where you can select by payment, especially by payment modality, how you want to pay your vendors. And then third, we come from inside of the ERP, but not only that, we allow your remittance to come from inside the ERP as well. And that might sound like a small detail until you've actually lived it. Vendors often need specific details, and some organizations want ERP-generated remittances for consistency, while others, they're okay with less information that the payment providers provide. We allow finer control of what the vendor gets when they need it, and the AP team will get fewer calls saying, what's this payment for? And finally, we don't break or replace normal ERP payment capabilities. We let you decide yourself. You can pay some vendors with us. You can pay some vendors yourself internally. We don't break your processes. So the uniqueness is controls at the movement of payment, provider flexibility by modality, remittance control, and ERP first continuity. That combination is what really lets you modernize your payments without losing control or creating a new system that you have to manage forever. So let's talk about that rebate percentage that we talked about earlier. We talked about turning AP from a cost center into a profit center. And the important thing to remember is we're not selling a typical subscription tool. We're selling payment modernization program with a meaningful net financial return for most customers. So here's an example. A customer of 25 million in AP spend, and I'm suggesting only 10% of it gets converted to card, which is actually quite conservative. And at these numbers, a customer will still yield about $15,000 a year after all the program expenses. And the point isn't that they're just going to convert 10% of the spend to card and get $15,000. Like we said, these are modest numbers. Most customers get far higher results. Today, though, we're offering something very special. For the first 6 customers, we're going to waive the implementation fee, and we're going to waive the monthly fee for the first year. That means that you can get into this with zero risk and zero implementation costs. So pretty significant savings. So if this has your attention, the next best move is to let us help you better understand what this program looks like for you. We'll show you the rebate opportunity, the operational savings, and where the fraud reduction value starts to show up. We do have a short window for this first 6 customers, so there's an advantage to being a quick mover. So if you want to explore that, get a hold of me there at roi@sourcetech.com, go to our website, or call the number that's there. So I want to thank you all for your time and attention, and I hope to hear from you guys very soon.
Thanks, Jay. That was a great way to wrap up our industry demo day. It's kind of just scary about all the fraud that's going on right there, out there, you know.
It is.
We gotta be very careful with emails, with, like you said, voice, anything. Texts, I get a million text messages all the time. I get millions of phone calls all the time. It's just crazy.
I created one the other day for an example. I pulled Mike Rowe's voice off of a testimony that he gave in front of Congress, and then took that and did my introduction. In fact, if any of you are attending directions, I'm actually going to play it there. And it sounds just like him giving my introduction, like I could afford to pay to him to speak my introduction. So it's just kind of funny. And it sounds perfectly like him. You would not know that it isn't him.
That's crazy. Yeah, it's crazy what you can do now.
Yeah,
Crazy and scary at the same time.
it is.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for day 2 of our industry demo day for Business Central Manufacturing and Distribution. And Jay, I will see you next week at Directions then.
Sounds great. Thank you. See you soon.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.